Hello, this is Sharon Cluck with Mind to Messiah Ministries, and today we are looking at Genesis 18 and part of 19. In this study today, we're going to see that God himself, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh, comes and pays a visit to Abraham and Sarah. The angels are actually coming to look for Sarah. They have come specifically for her to bring a message. They are giving her the promise of Isaac, which is going to be an absolutely miraculous birth. There's no way for this to happen in the natural. She's 90, Abraham is 100 years old, and this is a promise that Sarah thinks is laughable. So then God tells Abraham, because he is his friend, that there's a problem in Sodom and Gomorrah and that destruction is on its way. Well, Abraham decides that he is going to intercede for Lot and for the entire land of Sodom and Gomorrah. We talk about intercession. We talk about why Lot would offer up his daughters. Why would he do that? How does he manage to go out and even talk to his son-in-laws if there's so much violence going on in the city? We discuss all those things and what happens with that. Why does Lot's wife turn into a pillar of salt? What's the backstory behind that? So there are outcries coming up from Sodom. Who is doing the outcries? So one of the things that we talk about in this teaching today is the idea of the threshold covenant, which was a strong part of the customs of the Hebrew people. And even though Lot is in a wicked city, he has the background of his generations and his upbringing and time that he spent with Abraham. He exercises that threshold covenant. If you want more information about the threshold covenant, I have a whole series of teaching on covenant, and part 3 on this channel will give you details on the threshold covenant. It opens up many things about the New Testament and our entering in through the blood of Jesus. I hope you'll enjoy this. Stay tuned to the end. Give us a likes, a thumbs up, subscribe, leave your comments. We want to know if you've ever heard of some of these things, or do you have ideas yourself? We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the end.
This is Genesis 18:1. The Lord is appearing unto Abraham, appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. When it says the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, anytime you see capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, it is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. It is Yahweh himself, God. So this time he comes in the form of a man. And I've told you previously that the Hebrews had an understanding that there were two Yahwehs. There was the one that you saw and the one that was invisible, because he would appear as a man. So this is Yahweh himself who shows up, and he shows up in the form of a man. So this is one of those circumstances where the creator of the universe has personally come down to Abraham. He has not only brought him a message, but he's also included him in decision making to either save or to destroy Sodom. Can you even consider that God would ask you what you think? But he said, shall I do this without talking to Abraham? So Mamre is a significant place throughout the scriptures. It is in Hebron. It's the land that Caleb conquered. And so if we remember, Caleb is older than anybody else when they go into the land. He and Joshua are the only ones that made it through the 40 years in the wilderness. And when they finally enter into Jericho, the land has to be conquered. And Hebron is the area that Caleb wants, and he goes in to conquer that. This place is going to be really important because this is where all of the patriarchs are also going to be buried. Abraham is at the door of his tent in Mamre. It's a hot day. He's probably waiting to catch a breeze. Verse 2, and he lifts up his eyes and he looks, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and he bowed himself toward the ground. So he sees 3 men. There's no information about how these men appeared. Doesn't tell us if they're glowing, if they look like normal people. I'm assuming that because Abraham has been in the presence of God, that he recognizes the presence, he recognizes the spirit, but they have come looking like men because when the angels get to Sodom, they are mistaken as men as well. Besides that, they sit down and they have a meal. They actually eat a full meal with Abraham, and you would probably have to have a physical body to be able to do that. And Hebrews 13:2 says, to be not forgetful, to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. So bowing is a gesture of respect, especially to strangers that are perceived important. However, Abraham is running, so there's some urgency here. He's been in Yahweh's presence in the past, and like I said, I think he understands and knows his presence. He bows low to the ground. It's a posture that is reserved for royalty and divine beings. This is almost a prostrate bowing down. So I've written a whole book about angelic presence that emphasizes divine presence hidden in plain sight. He doesn't need a physical confirmation like wings or a choir or to tell the story about angels. So they show up. They're here all the time. Genesis 18:3, and he said, my Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. So the word favor can mean grace. Here the word favor means acceptance. If I have found acceptance in your sight. Verse 4, let a little water, I pray thee, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourself under the tree. So these are supernatural beings, but Abraham wants to minister to their physical needs. He is a man of great hospitality. It's one of the things we know about Abraham all the way through his life. Verse 5, and I will fetch a morsel of bread, and I will comfort your hearts. And after that you shall pass on, and therefore are you come to our servant? And they said, so do, as you have said. So he wants to comfort their hearts. This phrase, comfort your hearts, is aimed at the whole being. Abraham thinks this is why they've come to him, to be refreshed. Verse 6, and Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and he said, make ready quick 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. So he's talking about go get the bread ready and make it on the hot coals. Well, you think about how hot it is already. It's the heat of the day, and he's been outside of the tent waiting for a breeze, and now they're going to fire up the furnace and get the bread started. Verse 7, and Abraham ran into the herd, and he fetched a calf, tender and good, and he gave it unto a young man, and he hastened to dress it. Pick one of their very best to serve our guest, is what he's saying. And he took butter and milk and the calf, which he had dressed, and he set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. So this is where the principle, don't boil a goat in its mother's milk, is misapplied. We see that in Leviticus when we go through the law, and people say, well, you can't eat a cheeseburger because you can't eat dairy with meat. Well, here we got the God of the universe eating curds and eating meat in the same meal. I think it's good for Yahweh. It's okay for us. Verse 9, and they said unto him, where's Sarah thy wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. So the angels have come looking for Sarah. That's what they're doing there. They say, we want to know where Sarah is. Sometimes angels come looking for you. Verse 10, and he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And so Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent which was behind him. So next year at this time, you're going to have a son through Sarah. Verse 11, and Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I'm waxed old, shall I have pleasure with my Lord being old also? So Sarah has prayed, she's believed, she's cried, she's been humiliated, she's been scorned for being childless. If you remember when God told us this to Abraham earlier, he pleaded with God to just bless Ishmael. Let's not do this whole next kid. Let's just please bless Ishmael. So this is unbelievable, so unbelievable that it's laughable. Verse 13, and the Lord said unto Abram, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child when I am old? So Yahweh's questioning, what is behind her laughter? Is it doubt? This just proves to us all that it's not all about our faith that causes God to act. Sometimes it's just his sovereign will. Sometimes we try to manipulate God. We think we can earn things, and sometimes God just has a plan. Verse 14, is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. What a question. Is anything too hard for Yahweh? What's going on in your life? Is anything too hard for him? He's just saying, nothing, nothing, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible for thee. So God is going to show up for this event. Verse 15, and then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, nay, but you did laugh. He doesn't correct her. She's been lying. He didn't correct her. He just tells her, I know you did laugh, and he knows why. He set this whole thing up. Verse 16, and the man rose up from thence, and they looked towards Sodom, and Abram went with them to bring them on their way. So it's customary to go out to meet your guest and customary to see them on their way. This is a Hebrew custom. So he goes along with them. And he says, am I going to do this and not tell Abraham what I'm doing? So this is what the Witness Lee commentary says, that Yahweh was looking for an intercessor in the person of Lot. God was looking down through time, and he knew that Ruth, the Moabitess, would be part of the lineage of the Messiah. She comes from the line of Lot. Who is God speaking to when he says, shall I hide what I'm doing from Abraham? Is this other angels, or is this the divine council? Who's he talking to? Verse 18, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and a mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. He's going to be great, important, mighty, great in number, strength. They will be countless. All nations will be blessed by him. This is the destiny of this man, Abraham. Verse 19, for I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him. This is what God knows about him. He knows he can trust him, that when he gives him a covenant, it will be passed to his children. And they shall keep the ways of Yahweh to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. God knows Abraham. So this exchange he's having is like friend to friend. Abraham was a friend of God. God knows us as well. He knows what he can trust us with. He will teach his household. That was the big thing that God knew about Abraham. He would teach his household. So this is part of what God gets God's attention in your life as well. Can you be trusted to honor God by teaching your children the ways of God? God wants to bring about everything he has spoken over Abraham. He wants to do the same thing in your life as well. So what has God spoken over you? Now, when I say that, does something come up, or do you have to think about it? Can he trust you with his call on your life? We're not too old. We're not too young. We are called to serve until we have taken our last breath. You got that, Pastor? You're never going to be too old. You never get to quit. You never get to retire. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, there's a cry coming up from Sodom. So let's explore what that cry might be. If everyone in the country is corrupt, if everybody in Sodom and Gomorrah is corrupt, then who's doing this crying? So let me give you a little bit out of the book of Jasher, Jasher 18:11. 5 cities incredibly evil and wicked, and their crimes were great before God. This was a plush land with much water. So I'm not reading right out of there. I'm telling you a story. I didn't want to give the same credence to the book of Jasher's I have to Genesis, so I'm just going to give you this story. So there's a plush land. They have a big valley. And the people of Sodom would go and gather in the valley 4 times a year with their wives, their children, and all that belonged to them. And they would rejoice there and sing and dance. It was a wife swapping event that went on for days. They would rise up and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and the husband would not say a word. And this would go on from morning to night. That's the kind of activity. And I want you to realize what it says. It says wives. It doesn't say virgins. That will help us understand better what's happening with Lot later on. When a stranger came to their cities to sell wares, they would all gather together and rob him of whatever he had. And then they would run him out of town. Or they would invite a stranger into their home pretending to be hospitable. And then they would rob them of their clothing, their donkey, and anything that they would have. They would then charge them for staying in their house and say, I'm taking your donkey and I'm taking your mantle because you stayed in my house and you didn't pay me for it. Well, they offered him to. The man already had everything that he needed for his animal and for himself. He had no place to stay. So what happens is Sodom is on the way to places, and people would get stuck there overnight, and then they would have to find some place to lodge. That's what was so devastating about that, because anybody that came into this town was going to be harmed. That's all there was to it. They had laws against hospitality. And when we look at some of the scriptures, we find out hospitality or lack of it was some of the reasons that they were destroyed. Each day, unknowingly, the tab would run up. So they would try to get a person to stay over another night. They go to stay one night and they, oh no, stay another night. Oh no, stay another night. Unknowingly, the tab would just keep running up. And so he would ask for his belongings back, and the man would tell him that he was dreaming, that he didn't have those things when he came. And so now I'm going to interpret your dream. I'm going to tell you that you didn't have those things when you came, because they would put them up and hide them from them. You were dreaming. And so now I'm going to interpret your dream. And so then when the man would go before, the traveler would go before the judge would say, this is the custom in our community. He cannot interpret a dream for you without charging you. So then he would be charged for the interpretation of the dream that he never had. It was just crazy. And there was an outcry from anybody that came to Sodom. So chapter 19. Their evil judges set up beds erected in the streets. So this is out of Jasher still. And they would force strangers to lie in the bed, and then they would stretch them to death from one end to the other. If the person was too tall, they would just roll it over on both sides until they would suffocate together. They enjoyed torture and they enjoyed murder. So if a poor person came into town, they would give him silver and gold when he came in, and then they would make everybody in town vow to not sell him anything, no bread. And they would just enjoy watching him starve to death. When he would die, they go back and take back the silver and the gold. These are stories out of Jasher that were going on in Sodom. So Jasher 19:20. There's a story of Sarah who sends Eleazar to Sodom to check on Lot. He saw a poor man that was robbed and his clothes taken. And so he strove with the sodomite, and he got the man from Sodom, and he got hit in the head with a stone. So Eleazar, the servant of Abraham, gets hit with a stone in the head. And the man wants to charge Eleazar for hitting him in the head. And he said, I have ridded you of this bad blood that was in your head. And so he wants to charge him for that. Eleazar goes before the judge, and the judge says, pay him. So Eleazar picks up a stone, he smites the judge in the head, and he says, "Now I have rid you of the bad blood in your head. Pay this man what I owe him." So kind of entertaining. So they proclaimed they would not feed another poor person. So Lot's daughter, so he has two other daughters. He has two daughters that live with him that are virgins. His two other daughters, because if you remember, he sends out to get the two sons-in-laws. Lot has a daughter, and there was a poor man that came, and she would go to fetch water every day, and on the way, she would take her pitcher and she'd take a morsel of bread in there and she would feed the man. Well, the city was upset that he wasn't starving to death. They were waiting for him to starve to death. So they sent 3 men out to watch and see who was feeding him and what was going on. And when they realized this is Lot's daughter that's doing that, they take her into the center of the city and they burn her to death. These cries are ascending to heaven. So there's a city in Edmon in Jasher 1937, and that woman was found feeding a poor person as well. And what they did with her is they hung her up and covered her in honey outside of a beehive. And then the bees just stung her to death. And they watched that. The Lord was provoked at this and at the works of the Sodom. So they had abundance of food, they had tranquility among them, and still they would not sustain the poor and the needy. And in those days, their evil doings and their sin became great before the Lord. So those are just some of the things that you can find in the Apocryphal about. We don't have all this detail in the scriptures. You can, again, as I tell you, when we teach from these extra biblical books, you could take it or leave it. But it does fill in some gaps that tells you how wicked these people are and what was going on and who's crying. Who's crying out to God? Well, the people that they're killing, the families of the people that they're killing, the travelers that are coming into the town. That's the cry going up before God. So Genesis 18:21, I will go down now and I will see whatever they have done, altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. So their evil is so terrible that it provokes Yahweh to come down to see for himself. I think that Yahweh has plenty of angels that can report back to him, but this is so bad, he wants to see it for himself. So now Abraham is going to begin to intercede for Sodom. 18:22. And the men turned their faces from thence, and he went towards Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near, and he said, drawing near, wants to have a personal communication with him. Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? This is still a huge question today. Pre-adventure, there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner. So this is what Abraham is saying to God. Oh, I know you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that. To slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? So this is a really bold man. In my estimation, it looks like he's challenging God, but the commentaries say he's a friend of God. They're talking face to face and they're having a conversation. 26, and the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And I will spare all the evil in that place for the 50 righteous. That should tell us what is restraining judgment right now. There are still the righteous among us. If God is going to spare a place for 50 righteous, that's why we're still not seeing judgment fall like it should, because God still has righteous people. There are still wheat among the tares. Verse 27, and Abraham answered and he said, behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which I am but dust and ashes. So Abraham recognizes his frailty before God. He is nothing but dust, and God has breathed life into this dust. But Abraham is an intercessor.
He is so much more compassionate than what you and I are. We'd be going, I hope they get their comeuppance. I hope they get what they deserve. We are not nearly as compassionate as what Abraham or even Yahweh is, even when he is determined to judge. So we're different. Often we think they deserve what they get. Verse 28, peradventure there shall be lacking 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. Verse 29, and he spake unto him yet again. And he said, peradventure, just suppose, there should be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure, there shall 30 be found there. So now he's going down by 10s. First he was going down by 5s. Now he's going down by 10s. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. We are seeing the mercy of God in every one of these answers. He and Abraham have a relationship that allows them to converse in this manner. Oh, that I would have that kind of relationship with God. Verse 31, and he said, behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Peradventure there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. For 20 righteous people among thousands of wicked, evil people, God is still going to spare them all. You talk about mercy. 32, and he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet, but just this once. Peradventure, 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communicating with Abraham. And Abraham returned unto his place. So God's done compromising. He's done bargaining. He got down to 10. He just leaves. I'm out of here. We've made a decision. If we find 10, we'll spare it. So now we are in Genesis 19. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them. And he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. Remember, this is a very wicked place. What is Lot doing in the gate? He does the same thing Abraham does when he saw the angels. He bows before them to the ground. To sit in the gate means that he is part of the leadership of this city. He's holding a position in government. In ancient Near East culture, the city gate wasn't just a physical entryway. It was a hub of civil life. Elders, judges, and leaders gathered there to conduct legal matters, settle disputes, and to make decisions on behalf of the community. When Genesis 19:1 says that Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom, it strongly implies that he held a position of authority or influence within this city. Now, we have to kind of wrap our minds around this, thinking about this guy's come into this wicked area, and he's risen to some kind of position. This is especially striking given the moral climate of Sodom. Lot's presence at the gate suggests that he had assimilated enough to be granted a civil role. Yet his actions, offering hospitality to the angels and later pleading with the mob, reveal a deep internal conflict. He's caught between his covenant heritage, which he got when he was Abraham, and the compromising culture around him. This is something every one of us are going to have to deal with, or our children are going to have to deal with. We have covenant promises, and we have to decide if we're going to be swayed by the culture around us. It's very easy to happen. Lot once journeyed with Abraham. He now sits in the gate of a doomed city. Others interpret it as a sign of his lingering hope to influence or to protect the city. How much had he compromised? If he has a place of authority in this corrupt atmosphere. Verse 2, and he said, behold now, lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house. He's going to try to protect them, to get them into his house as quick as he can without other people of the city realizing that they're there. And tarry all night and wash your feet, and you can rise up early and go on your way. And they said, nay, but we will abide in the streets all night. Lot knows exactly what will happen if these men, quote unquote, if they stay in the streets of Sodom overnight. He's exhorting them to not stay in the street. Please come with me. So Sodom has institutionalized wickedness, even outlawing charity and hospitality. Their God is themselves. They may have served Baal, Asheroth, or Molech. We don't know for sure who their God was. They didn't just reject Yahweh, but they mocked the very ideas of divine order. Verse 3, and he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and he did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat it. This is what we found in a Hebrew midrash called Genesis Rabbah, Rabbah. We find a story of Lot's wife unwilling to prepare a meal for the angels. She was disgusted with these men being in the house. She has assimilated into the society. She knows it's illegal for them to have these people in their house and to be protecting them. So Lot's hospitality versus Sodom's culture. Lot, who had retained some of Abraham's values, invited the angels into his home, and he asked his wife to prepare a meal. But she resisted, viewing hospitality as a foreign or even evil custom in Sodom, a city known for punishing generosity. When Lot asked her for salt to season the food, she replied scornfully, also, this evil custom you wish to introduce into this place? Instead of using your own supply, she went door to door asking neighbors for salt. Well, this wasn't just about seasoning. It was about calculating move to alert the townspeople that Lot had guessed, violating Sodom's harsh laws against hosting outsiders. That's from a commentary from a Hebrew midrash. The consequence, her actions led to the mob gathering at Lot's door, demanding the guests be handed over. Later, as the family fled the city, Lot's wife looks back and whether out of longing, defiance, or concern for her daughters left behind, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. So this midrash poignantly notes, she sinned with salt, and she was punished with salt. Have you ever heard of that before? It's very interesting. Before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. This is a mob. Remember, even the children have been conditioned in their celebration to participate in sexual sin. Genesis 19:5. And they called unto Lot, and they said unto him, where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and he shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly, so injuriously. And he calls them brethren. Behold now, I have 2 daughters which have not known men. Let me, I pray thee, bring them out unto you, and you just do with them as good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. Threshold covenant. When a stranger entered Lot's house, they came under his protection, under the authority of Lot's God. So that is the thinking. When you enter my house, you come under the protection of my God. You come under the authority of my God. When somebody comes into my house, they abide by my rules. My rules reflect my relationship with my God. That's how it is at your house, too. To the point that he would be willing to give up his own 2 daughters to save the lives of the angels. They were in covenant. Once they came under his roof, they were in covenant. They had come under the shadow of my roof, like in Psalms 91, under the shadows of the Almighty. Lot was not really ready willingly to give up his 2 daughters. He was simply making a point. That's a commentary. That's from Craig Hill. John 10, the thief comes up another way, so Jesus is the door. If you try to get to the Father without stepping over the blood of Jesus on the threshold of God's house, you are a thief and a robber. We enter into the kingdom of God over the threshold of the blood of Jesus. When someone stepped over the house of a Hebrew, over that threshold, they came under the protection of the God of that house. When you come to the host home, he is obligated to pour out a blood sacrifice at the threshold of the house, his dwelling. So this is part of the threshold covenant. The degree of the honor that he wants to bestow on the guest will determine the cost of the sacrifice. If he isn't an important guest, he may just pour out wine or a turtle dove. More important will have the blood of a goat. The more important will be the blood of a bull or an ox. As a guest, when you come to the house, you step over the blood, indicating that you are submitting to them and their hospitality, that you will allow them to provide and to care for you. If you wish to dishonor the host, you step in the blood. You are dishonoring their life. You are saying, this is what I think about your life. I put it under my feet. You are saying, I do not come in peace. So this is what I think of your life. I put it under my feet. This is what it is meant by trampling underfoot the blood of Jesus. When we step over the threshold blood, we are submitting to his protection and to the rules of the house of God. So now, here's another aspect of the threshold covenant. There was always one animal whose blood was never poured out unless you received a visit from a king, and that was the fatted calf. Everybody always hoped to have a visit from a king, but it was a rare thing to happen in a lifetime. You can think now why the older brother was so offended when the dad slaughtered the fatted calf for the younger brother. It was meant to be used for royalty. So what is truly going on here? This makes no sense to any of us. So let's park here for just a minute to try to understand this. These are virgin daughters. They're virgins, never been with a man. He has 2 at home, 2 others that are married. I learned years ago from a study from Craig Hill that he did on the covenant and talked about Sodom, that when a boy reached the age of 10 or 12, that he would go to live with a man. He would be his partner, and that the law of Sodom was to not approach a virgin for any other reason but for procreation. It was illegal to approach a virgin for any other reason but for procreation. So I tried to verify this information, and this is what I found. It was not easy to find. This is what I found. Cultural esteem of childbearing women. Motherhood is an identity. So this gives you an idea of where Sarah was at too. In many ancient Near East societies, a woman's social identity was tied to her ability to bear children. Until she did, she would often lack full personhood in legal or literary texts. So if she would be written about, she wasn't considered a full woman if she didn't have children. A dowry and a bride price. These payments were often contingent on childbirth. A woman's value in marriage was confirmed by her fertility, and full payment was sometimes withheld until she could bear a child. Women were ritually protected during pregnancy. They used amulets, incantations, and deities like bees in Egypt and Mesopotamia, where they invoked to guard against miscarriage and supernatural harm. Medical and magical fertility practices, from mandrakes, we see that with Rachel and Leah in Genesis, to herbal remedies in Babylon, the Babylonian text. Cultures invested heavily in fertility cures. And we got all kinds of information on that, and the dates of that were 1850 BCE and 1550 BCE. So the Canaanites, Mesopotamian, and Egypt had childbearing in high regard. This esteem may have created taboos or legal boundaries around approaching women outside reproductive context. So there really was an attitude that you didn't violate a virgin. They were there for reproductive means. The idea that virgins were off limits except for reproduction could explain Lot's suggestion, knowing that it would not be accepted. He is offering what Sodom had not yet corrupted. However, this mob wasn't seeking reproductive rights. This is Lot's effort to stop a repetition of Genesis 6. The mating of angels with humankind. He is attempting to prevent another cataclysmic event from ending the earth. Lot understood the spiritual danger of violating divine messengers, angels. In his mind, protecting the angels was not just hospitality, it was intercession against a cosmic collapse. Can you see that? If they still have the flood in mind because of the incursions of angels mixing with humans, and they still have that in their mentality, and this is going to happen again in Sodom, you can see why Lot would do whatever he had to do to stop that. Lot is adhering to the threshold covenant. When a stranger steps over your threshold, you're responsible for their well-being and safety. Okay, now we're back to Genesis, verse 9. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came into this place to sojourn, and he thinks he's the judge. And now we have to deal with worse with him than with them. And they pressed more so upon the man, even Lot, and they came near to break down the door. Press sore is they used much force to break down the door. This is an extended gang rape, and they are determined to carry out their evil. Verse 10, but the men put forth their hands, and they pulled Lot into the house to them, and they shut the door. The angels did that. And they smote the men there at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So we see that in the story of Elisha too. When the Syrian army comes to take Elisha, the angels smite him with blindness. They're looking right at Elisha, and they're right in the right place, and he is able to lead them all the way into Samaria, into enemy country, because the angels have blinded them to where they are and who he is. So that's why I always tell people, if you are in a situation, you can always believe God to blind the enemy and hide you in plain sight. Verse 12 of 19, and the men, the angels, said unto Lot, hast thou any here beside you, son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen greater before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has set us to destroy it. So they are here on a mission. We're going to get this done. We can see why the cry is going up. It's right here in our face. Verse 14, and Lot went out, and he spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters. And he said, up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he seemed as one that mocked to his son-in-laws. They thought he's joking. The only way he can go out is because the man outside are blinded. That's the only reason he could leave the house to go talk to his son-in-laws, because they've blinded everybody in the city. He has son-in-laws, and one whose wife has already been burned to death, according to Jasher, and another married daughter. So the Hebrew word used for sons-in-law is hatan, which means daughters' husbands. It's not a fiance. Some people speculate these are betrothed. They're not fiancés, they're husbands. This suggests these daughters were already married, not betrothed, and likely perished in the destruction of Sodom. The son-in-laws think it's a joke. Verse 15, and when the morning arose, the angels hastened Lot, saying, arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of this city. Be consumed in the iniquity of that city. Whoa. We could be swept away. Hebrews says that Lot was a righteous man. Get them out of here before they're swallowed up in this evil. Verse 16, and while he lingered, the men laid hold on his hand. So this is not a gentle taking by the hand. It was a strong grabbing and maybe even dragging him out of the city. And upon his hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto them, and they brought him forth, and they set him without the city. So this is God's mercy. He did not deserve to be rescued. But if you notice, this includes his entire household. It would have even included his sons-in-laws had they joined him. God wants to save your entire household. Same thing happened at the Passover. If they were in the house and the blood was on the door, the whole house was saved. It was the daddy who put the blood on there, but everybody in there was saved. That's why I think we need to just keep claiming our household and saying, God, the blood is on our doorpost. Our whole household will be saved. Verse 17, and it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, escape for your life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest thou be consumed. So the entire plain is about to be destroyed. Not just the cities. They're going to wipe out this whole plain where they've been having their gatherings. And Lot said unto them, oh no, not so, Lord. Not so is a plea. It's an exhortation. Behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight. And thou hast, how can he say, if I found grace in thy sight? They just got you out of this mess. If thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast shown unto me in saving my life, and cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil take me and I die. So think about this escape. They are leaving everything they know. Remember when he goes into Sodom, he's got flocks, he's wealthy, he builds a home there, he's got a place of position. They're going out with nothing. It makes you think you could understand why the wife might look back. But there's nothing they can take with them. Sometimes when we get away, when God delivers us from an evil circumstance or situation, the best thing we can do is to leave everything behind. And we know that for a fact. For people that are in drug-related situations, that are in abuse, they have to just get away and not take anything with them, just escape and start over. Magnify thy mercy is to show great power and praiseworthy mercy. He is not saying, I don't want to go to the mountains, but that I cannot. He's afraid of evil, and yet he's been living among evil all around him. I think I'd take my chances with the animals. He's already among a bunch of human animals. He has even experienced his daughters being burned to death, and he is afraid of what's in the mountains. Verse 20, behold now, this city is near to flee unto, and it's a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. So is it not a little one? and my soul shall live. So he thinks he can bargain with the angels instead of just doing what they've instructed. The phrase, my soul, is H5315 in the Strong's Concordance. It means self, life, appetite, mind, desire, emotion, passion, inner man, and his will. My soul shall live. All these things about me, I want to live. My passion, my emotions, my desire, my will. And he said unto him, see, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. So the angels also makes concession and agreement. Look at how many times we have seen in this portion of scripture where people have bargained either with God or with angels, and they respond. God responds and the angels respond. I find that astounding. Verse 22, haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. Escape is to be saved and delivered. God is holding up the judgment of 5 cities for the sake of one man. They're getting ready to destroy 5 cities. They're holding that up for one man. What does that say to us? What kind of impact do the people of God have in holding back the judgment of God? It's astounding. So God destroys Sodom, verse 23, and the sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. And then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. This is the fire of God's judgment, and it's raining down on these cities. It's mixed with stones of sulfur. It's said that it would have gassed them immediately because the brimstone is the word for sulfur. So when that sulfur is lit up, the gases come up out of it. You take a deep breath, and it can just end your life. In ancient texts, so God is merciful even in judgment. In ancient text, brimstone is the Old English word for sulfur, a yellow, pungent material that burns with blue flame and releases toxic fumes. When ignited, sulfur produces sulfur dioxide, a choking gas that can cause severe respiratory distress. The speculation is that it involved volcanic activity, meteor impact, or tectonic gas release. Either way, it was judgment by divine fire. Remember, God promised to not destroy the earth by water again. This is the future end of all things on the earth. Fire is a symbol of God's divine wrath, purification, and irreversible judgment. So I've only got a few more verses in Genesis before we get to the end of what we're going to share. So I want to cover a couple of things where we see fire. The heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed by fire. That's 2 Peter 3:10 through 12. It speaks of cosmic desolation or dissolving and fiery judgment, symbolic of the undoing or the corrupt creation and the ushering in of a new heaven and a new earth. Revelations 29 through 10. Fire came down from heaven and devoured them. That refers to the final rebellion after the millennial reign. Fire is the divine response to satanic deception and global defiance. In Revelations 8:7, a third of the earth was burned up, part of the trumpet judgments. Fire affects vegetation, signaling ecological collapse and a divine disruption. In Revelations 14:10 and 11, tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels. That's exactly what happened in Sodom. The angels watched that.
That refers to those who worship the beast. Brimstone, sulfur, is linked back to Sodom. Judgment for spiritual perversion. In Revelations 21:8, the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. It's the final destruction of the unrepentant. Fire here is eternal separation, not just physical destruction. Fire as a conventional reckoning. What was once protected, a pillar of fire, so God was once a pillar of fire protecting his people, it becomes destructive when they reject him. Purification versus punishment. Fire refines the remnant, but consumes the rebellious. God's refining fire is for his saints. So Genesis 19:25, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the city and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. The word looked is to regard, considered, showing regard for what was left behind. She still has a daughter left there and everything that they own. We do not know if they were permitted to take anything with them. With the haste that they left in, I doubt that. Verse 27, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and behold, lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. We have no idea how long these cities burned. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham, and he sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. The only reason that Lot was saved was for Abraham's sake. We must consider how important our intercession is for those that are still on the earth. So here's a couple more things. As awful as the sin of Sodom were, they did not compare to the rejection of the gospel of Yeshua. Consider in Matthew 10:15, verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than it is for this city. In Jeremiah 23:14, Judah's sin is compared to Sodom. In Ezekiel 16:49 and 50, this was the sin of your sister Sodom, arrogance, gluttony, and unconcern for the poor. That's what we have in the book of Ezekiel. He tells us it wasn't just sin, arrogance, gluttony, and unconcern for the poor. More than sex sin was involved. It was injustice and pride and no concern for the poor. And here's one more, Revelations 11:18. Their bodies will lie in the street of the great city, figuratively called Sodom and Egypt. Speaking of the two witnesses, and all of this, we see that in God's judgment is still looking for the righteous remnant. And we hope that that is us. A lot to take in with all that.
Thank you so much for staying to the end. Please let us know if this ministered to you. If you learned something new, please give us a comment below. We love to hear from you. Give us a like, a share. Please subscribe and share this with other people. This is more than your normal, regular Bible study. And I hope that using these extra biblical books is not offensive to you, but that it actually helps to fill in some of the blanks. God bless you. We'll see you next week.